come to our big focus this evening. Byju's journey to one of India's most valuable startups has been an astonishing one. At one point, it had become the world's largest edtech startup and India's most valuable unicorn. The company rose to the top of the startup ecosystem on the back of aggressive acquisitions, of course, great valuations, and this was based on the hope that more and more people would want to study online. This all in the backdrop of the pandemic helped the company receive funding at monumental valuations. Lately though, the company is struggling. Now, is that a reality check sinking in as restrictions have eased and people want more physical learning? The Byju's also offers offline tuitions. Is it an overestimation of growth? Is it a business model which needs to be looked at again? These are the questions coming up. First, of course, its FY21 results was a shocker. Their losses jumped nearly 20 times year on year. After that, in this cost-cutting spree, they've let go of at least 2,500 employees. There are reports that 5,000 employees in all have been put on performance notice. Recently, there was a letter from Byju Ravindran, who wrote very emotionally to all of the employees that were sacked. I'm joined now first by my colleague Nayantara, who's breaking down the details of that letter, which gives us a glimpse of what's happening inside Byju's.
Byju Ravindran, the founder of the world's most valuable edtech startup, Byju's, has written a very emotional letter to all employees. This letter comes at a time when Byju's is going to be letting go 5% of its workforce. There's nearly 2,500 employees. The letter starts with Byju Ravindran saying he wants to set the record straight and it's best everyone hears from him. He thanks everyone for their time at Byju's, talks about the hyper-growth years during the pandemic and the tough times that edtech is now having to battle the winter season. That the time has come to become more profitable, to become capital efficient, and that is why the tough decision has to be made. He says what the world will say as a layoff, he thinks of and wants it to be a temporary farewell to bring all of these employees back home, back at Byju's. Remember, Byju's, valued at $22 billion, very recently raised another $250 million via a rights issue. In its history, it has raised nearly $6 billion. We're still waiting for audited results for the previous financial year, but the one before that, its losses had swelled nearly 20x to 4,500 crores, even as revenues stayed flat. There is pressure on Byju's to become profitable. Its own target is to do so by 2023. In this letter, Byju Ravindran says, I hope you will trust me when I say we have made available the best possible exit package for you, which includes extended medical insurance coverage for you and your family members, outplacement services led by some of the industry's finest recruitment specialists, fast-track full and final settlement, and a special provision to allow you to look for jobs while on our payroll. We don't have a reaction from the employees as yet. We don't know if all of the 2,500 have been laid off as yet, but this seems to be a damage control exercise by the founder himself to reach out directly and to set the record straight.
Damage control exercise maybe from the point of public positioning, but is it going to control the damage internally within the company? What really went wrong with Byju's, and is this a symptom of the edtech space or is this a Byju's problem? Sriram Subramaniam, founder and MD of InGovern Research, joining us today on the show. Meeta Sengupta, educator, with us today, and K. Ganesh, serial entrepreneur, also with us on the show. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for joining us. Sriram, let me begin, with your take on what went wrong with Byju's. I mean, they have been at the receiving end of a lot of flack as well for very aggressive marketing and sales. A bulk of the 2,500 employees being let go are reportedly from their sales or their BDA teams. Do you think this is a course correction or there is something fundamentally wrong which is yet to be identified?
Good evening. I think, as you rightly said, there was a tailwind during the COVID years, and due to the excessive funding, companies like Byju's really did grow phenomenally. That being said, if in your heydays, which was those tailwind days, the company did not was not profitable or did not create a buffer, then how is it going to weather even a simple storm? And that, I think, is hitting hard reality now. As you said, edtech, though there is definitely a space for edtech, there is definitely a marketplace for edtech across the education value chain, but it did not grow in a measured fashion. And so, from that perspective, now is the time to make deep cuts. And I don't think the measure that was taken yesterday is sufficient enough. Probably much deeper cuts are required. Probably all aspects of their business processes need to be reviewed. Which business segments also they need to be stay in also need to be reviewed, and probably they need to definitely hunker down and work towards profitability and measured growth.
You know, K. Ganesh, so the idea is not to point fingers and try to tear down Byju's or Byju Ravindran personally. It's to understand what went wrong, because in a matter of, I would say, 6 to 8 months, the sheen has worn off. There's a bit of a cautionary tale here as well about expanding too fast, growing at valuations without perhaps seeing the big picture of sustainability.
Yeah, so I think both of it is true. We should separate two issues here. One is what the pandemic did to certain sectors, including edtech sector, and what steps edtech companies took in the tailwind and now are suffering once the pandemic is over and we are back to normal. And secondly, the general startup scenario. See, startup and entrepreneurs are adventurers, are risk takers. They play to win. So they look at opportunity, go aggressively, raise risk capital, venture capital from venture capital investors who invest knowing fully well the risk involved and raise money and expand. When that kind of adventurism happens, it's like going into the seas, exploring, finding a new land. It is bound to happen that you will face storms. You may lose the ship. There will be thing. Otherwise, you have to just stay in the shore. That's not what you do. So that is one. Therefore, we have seen not just in Byju's or edtech, we have seen across all companies, across all sectors globally. When you raise money, when the things are good, you raise money, you aggressively expand, launch new products, new verticals, and new geographies, and not everything works out. Then you cut back, then you shut down divisions, you lay off people. Happens with every sector. Just 1 minute. Let me just talk about
poorly even in FY21.
Yeah. So no, let's talk. That's one. Two, separately, there was euphoria and expectation because of the tailwind. None of us really thought that when we go back to normal, things will pull back to this extent. Everybody knew that it was a pandemic-induced growth which will come down, but the level of coming down we did not expect. That is two. Third, clearly, there are multiple things that Byju's, he is a terrific entrepreneur, Byju Ravindran, need to look at, do course correction, introspect, and this, whether it is aggressive sales policy or it is that. But again, let's not, 2,500, 5% employees for the employees, my heart goes out to them. They have to find new employment. But understand this, 50,000 people they have recruited. They are laying off 2,500 now, maybe another 2,500.
No, but it's
I mean,
a symptom.
that is a fraction.
It's a symptom. It's a symptom, which is why I'm
No,
not talking
not
about
really.
these 2,500.
It's not a
10,000
symptom.
people have lost their jobs in edtech. You're cutting costs because of a larger problem, isn't it?
No. You are cutting cost, not because of a larger problem, because you expanded at the time when you thought there was a huge opportunity. That opportunity of that scale does not exist today. So you have to cut back. What do you really want? Do you want that they had not hired these people at all? That would have been worse. By nature, they are known to go for opportunities, and then there will be cutback. I feel sad for the people who are doing that. And to be fair to Byju's, the fact that they have given outplacement services, they have extended health insurance, they have done everything possible
that's
to
fine.
mitigate
I'm
that.
not focusing today on the fact that why did they sack 2,500 people. With
So coming back to your fundamental
things were
question,
going, it was perhaps an inevitability, and like Sriram Subramaniam says, it may not stop at 2,500. I just want to get Meeta
no,
in.
there is a model problem in certain sectors. For example, the White Hat Junior, they acquired in US.
Yeah.
That is bleeding the company very badly.
We need to bring the lens onto what went wrong, and the
what went wrong?
of
The consumer
2,500 people is a symptom. I'll come back to you. So let me just get Meeta Sengupta's view in as an educationist who's joining us in, because it's a revolutionary idea, right? It's a revolutionary idea, which of course the tailwind of the pandemic was there, undoubtedly. But that idea and its utility cannot dissipate once the pandemic is over. And clearly that's not happening. We showed the student numbers, and the source of that is from Byju's. The student numbers have been growing between 2021 and 2022 as well.
The student numbers will continue to grow, but I think we need to take cognizance of what both our previous speakers have said. They have said that these edtech companies are adventurers. They're absolutely right. They are risk takers. It is the nature of business to be a risk taker. Whereas then it is the nature of education to stamp down on risk. Now, do you see the dichotomy between the two? You have a structural dichotomy between an education thing and an ed tech business. One is trying to, the startup world says, you fix your plane while you're flying it. You change your product on the go, pivot as you go along, correct yourself as you make mistakes quickly and fall down fast. The education business hates mistakes. 99 marks QI, 100 QNI, even that 1 mark mistake, we hate it. Structurally, teachers don't want to see a product or cannot even adjust and adapt to a product that is not fully developed. This is the structural difference between an edtech business and the education business, or even the teaching tutorial business. Let's not talk about the whole of education. Even the teaching tutorial business is very focused on getting everything 100% right. Quota as a model worked perfectly. Even though we don't like it morally, etc., this is not a moral argument. This is a business argument. The business argument for quota worked, there was replication, there was scaling, everything happened. EdTech is not seeking to create the perfect product first. And that is exactly what we saw in Byju's case. Because they are a pioneer, and this is all credit to them for taking all the risks that a pioneer takes. It is not easy to be somebody who builds the road ahead. But because they are a pioneer, because they're adventuring into AR space, VR space, I'm hoping they get into the metaverse space as well. They have been trying to do things in a way that is way too fast. The product had not developed. And that is why they had to go down the route of overselling. And that is why you see the pressure on them and the pressure on staff. Now, this gamble, in a way, risk is all risk, may have paid off if the money kept coming in, if the valuations kept going in, because there are 2 or 3 things to note about building an education technology product. An education technology product is very, very expensive to build. It takes a lot of time to build and stabilize. That kind of time VCs normally do not give products. So if you're trying to create a strong edtech product, you will run out of time and you will be answerable to people. So if the money keeps coming in, you still have a chance of winning. You still have a chance of
I want to focus on the overselling part of it.
Just stuck.
They're still the biggest. They're still the biggest in the edtech space.
Yes, and
there's no taking that away.
Hope. In fact, I still
the
have
edtech space is still growing. I want K. Ganesh to come in on this. The question about overselling, mis-selling, because all of those allegations have been haunting Byju's. That did people who bought the product understand it? Then your cancellations which came in. We all know the mess with Deloitte and their FY21 numbers, and you know the different kinds of calculations of what was revenue, what was not, all of that. So those are also some fundamental question marks that need to be answered.
No, absolutely. I think at the speed with which they have scaled, it's phenomenal. And in that process, the sales process, the mis-selling that has been reported substantially, obviously there is truth in it, otherwise it would not be reported, needs to be introspected, corrected and fixed. And some of the stories that we hear about really poor people being missold and have to take loans and to pay are really heartrending. It's completely unacceptable. They need to fix it. So that is wrong, not acceptable, and needs to be fixed, because you're exploiting the parents' vulnerability towards children's education, and you're trying to do that. Separately on the financial side, see, we have to separate the two. That is wrong. Now, financial side, when you change the accounting method and methodology, there will be restatement of accounts. Is very normal. Indian GAAP, US GAAP, Ind AS are all different accounting policies. I don't think we should read too much into that. Separately, between a founder who wants to aggressively, creatively position what is revenue and profit as per what is legally acceptable, he wants to position a manner. Deloitte, as the Big Four auditor, will take the most conservative view, will have a different view. Again, is quite normal. They have to ultimately, Deloitte has to sign. They will put their foot down and sign only what they are comfortable with. Entrepreneur from his side will push. I don't think there is any fraud or any misstatement there. It is just the way of creatively saying what is the revenue. We have seen this even in e-commerce, where you are taken
Can you be
GMV,
creative in your? I want to get Mr. Shriram in there. Can you be creative in the way you calculate your revenues? I know you need creativity to run a business, but I think revenues need to be in black and white.
No, I think this is the fundamental mistake that many large unicorns are making, right? I mean, you are the size of unicorn. You are potential listed company, and you still have not put in processes. You have lost your values just in the search for valuations. So that is where, as you said, they are creatively treating revenues. Even today, one listed company, Paytm, is talking about EBITDA without accounting for ESOP cost. What does that mean? That is their non-GAAP line item. So all I'm saying is that these companies are defining their own metrics, whereas accounting standards essentially are those for comparing apples and oranges. And that is standardizing accounts and standardizing metrics so that external people can measure these companies or can get a perspective on these companies. At the end of the day, Byju's is a contract between the valuations, is a contract between the investors and the founders, right? And valuations can change overnight from 100 to all the way to 10 also. So that everyone knows. And in this age, I think what companies need to aspire for is more of measured growth, valuations, processes in place, very robust processes. I think that is the missing part across many of these companies.
Okay, Mitaji, in terms of the edtech space and where the edtech space will move ahead, of course, it became a very hot space. As an educationist, do you think that that kind of demand still exists? When students can go out, they can meet teachers, they can get a more personal touch. Do you think that the kind of utility that these companies have will have to be redefined?
I am very optimistic about the edtech space, but not the edtech space as it defines edtech today. I think edtech has to recognize that it must pivot to the business of customized learning care for every student. And the technology as it is evolving now, I mean, we already had adaptive question answers at a very basic level 4 or 5 years ago. Many of them have claimed to have AI-based customization. I haven't really seen grand evidence of that in terms of students feeling cared for in their learning or mentored in their learning. We have AR and VR in Byju's has acquired a future type of company. We have a lot of these technologies that are growing, and then we are going to see the beginning of the metaverse, and it's not going to take too much time, 5-7 years at the most. Now, if edtech companies continue to pretend that they will make money of the masses, again, the quota thing or any bulk school, mass school thing, that only the top 5% will get the best tuition and the rest will pay for the top 5% to get tuition. And that has been part of the business model for many educators. That model will not work. We have to move to this model of plenty, where the last bench, the bottom 25%, the student who is struggling, the student who has disabilities is designed for. You design for a weak student, you have already designed for the strength. This is the opportunity we have to create equity. This is the opportunity we have to create care. But if you do not design, and the simple word for it used in startup space is simply user experience. So let's say student experience, simplified, but reduced to the simplified term. If you genuinely begin to design a product for student learning care, your profits cannot go anywhere. you will not merely become a supplement to the school. You will, in fact, replace possibly the school.
Also, unfortunately and importantly in our country, education and profitability have to be linked together in a very sensitive way. We already have the problem of education becoming too profit driven, education which should be a fundamental right and which is available for free not being of that same quality. And then you have, of course, the edtech space, which needs to make a profit, but also is providing a human service. It's a very important, basic kind of service. So finding the heart in that, perhaps, is one way to go back to the drawing board. Anyway, thank you so much to all of you for joining us in this deep dive on what has happened to one of India's most valuable unicorns and where the recovery can come in from. We'll take a very short break at this point, but we'll be back with a lot more.